So, Christine, listen, season two, Hijack. I know the fans are like in a complete uproar in the best way, just
Yeah.
about this story, this project in general. So, I took things back and heard that once you initially came across the script, you absolutely could not put it down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What was it that intrigued you so much about not only the story, but also Marsha's like storyline?
Um, so sort of the first part of the question, I think if ever I get a script and I physically can't put it down, and if I keep turning the pages, that's generally a good sign. I think
Mm.
when it's on the page and you can feel that sort of um, the cliffhangers and wanting to know what's next at the end of every episode. And if you're actually like making noises like, oh my God, and wow, and no, if you're doing that kind of thing when you're reading a script, that's a pretty good sign. So I definitely had that feeling of wanting to know more about the characters and wanting to know where the story was going to go. And, in the hands of somebody else, that idea might have been a bit sort of cliched, but I think it was just done in such an interesting way. So, it's always with, the script always is a kind of big hook. And then in terms of, Marshall, I liked the idea of a character that sort of brought kind of an emotional grounding to the piece because obviously Hijack 1 and Hijack 2, the stakes are really, really high. And so I think for the audience, I think it was really important for them to know that this person, Sam, was emotionally invested in something. Otherwise, he's just a guy on a plane saving lives. And I think people need to know that sort of there's a bit more kind of, I guess, dimension to a character. So I really like the fact that you have this person who represented something in Sam's life which was real and emotionally important to him, so that you knew that he was invested in sort of getting off that plane. So I really like that idea.
And I think speaking of Sam Nelson and his emotional side, obviously intermixed with his character, what was it like sharing an on-screen son with Idris Elba? And once you learned that you both were going to lose this son, what
Yeah.
came over you?
I honestly, that was such a big surprise.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's where it was going to go. And, as a rule, as an actor, I sort of actually tend to avoid any stories about dead children because it's really hard to do. It's really emotionally
Yeah.
challenging. It's a really emotionally challenging thing to play, right? And so
Yeah.
for me, as a parent, it's something when I read it in a script, I kind of go, oh, I don't know if I want to do that for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, because you've got to exist in that space. But so that was a real surprise. But actually, again, what I loved about it is it meant that the audience were coming back to these characters
Yeah.
and they were completely different in as much as they'd gone through probably one of the most profound things anybody would ever go through. And so then for the audience, when they're coming into season two, I think initially there was a real sense of like, Sam looks different. Sam
Yeah.
looks different to how he looked in season one. He
Yes.
looks more broken. He looks more frail. His shoulders are down. I mean, I think there's something really interesting about
The
Idris's
posture.
physicality and, was a bit more solid, and just a bit more defeated, very different from where we found him. And the same for Marsha, different environment, different emotional environment. And so I think already going into season two, the audience knows something's different. These characters are different. They're not walking the same way. They're not holding themselves the same way. So that already adds a really interesting layer, I think, to the story.
You just said so much right there, but I want to go back to you tackling the emotional side of losing the son throughout this story. How did you personally handle that? Like,
Mhm.
how did you approach that? Be like before you went filming on location, and what did that
Yeah,
look like for you?
different actors have different sort of processes, and I certainly I'm not going to pretend that I have the method, and it's probably it's lots of different things. It's sort of making sure you've got the right environment for
Yeah.
sort of when you're working. I mean, a lot of the stuff I think with those kind of things, when it's sort of emotionally intense, it's somewhere you have to get to on the day. It's not easy to prepare that level of emotional intensity beforehand. It just, you couldn't exist, just be really weird to walk around holding those type of feelings. So, a lot of stuff happens on the day, and it's about sort of creating the right environment. For me, I need things to be really, really quiet. And I tend to take myself away from where everyone else is working. And certainly when we're in filming mode, it just needs to be quiet for me to be able to stay, I guess, in the role. And, one of the hardest things about doing this job is like keeping those emotions, simmering long enough for when you need them, or if you've got to do one, two, three, four takes of something, which again, we don't really have to do, not when you're doing those scenes. I think Jim's really good at knowing how much he can push you in those moments. But yeah, sometimes just music really helps. I think the hardest thing is, breathing really works. I think the hardest thing is like putting it down at the end of the day. It's not the doing it. I think once you sort of once you're kind of in that right state, that's okay. But what can be hard is like you when your day finishes and you just got to go home and try and be a regular person when you spent your whole day, thinking about your dead son. So that's probably where I try to, it's probably the unpreparing that's the most important bit, because like
Yeah.
whatever the saying is, don't take your work home with you. In that instance, you really want to be able to sort of take that hat off and try and go out into the world and let it all go and then sort of do it again the next day. But yeah, it is challenging. It's not, I think it's one of the hardest things about the job, honestly.
Wow, wow. I want to go back a little bit further. I found it very interesting, and I love the fact that you spoke to Sam Nelson's body posture,
Mm.
and the form of his shoulders and the lack thereof this go round with season two. Let's get into the choreography behind Marcia. The latter part of the series with the running.
Yeah.
I also love that you brought up the breathing. Like, talk to me about what that choreography process looked like for you, enacting certain movements, laying down, sitting down on yourself. You know what I mean? With
Thank you
me, I
so
kind of,
much. Really noticing that. I appreciate it because
yeah, I'm like, listen, Marsha is really giving it to the people, but what is going on?
it is action girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's listen again, it's challenging because obviously all of those physical beats, it is choreography. It's exactly as you would imagine. There's got to be, ABC, and then you have to hit this mark at certain times. And we still work with stunt actors, and whatever the stunt actors do, that has to be matched. And then we have to make it look like, we're doing it. And you're working with a steady cam, so you guys are having to work together. You might be, you're running forwards, they're running backwards, but if you're not at the same pace, it doesn't what there's so many things going on. And again, I think that's sometimes what people don't realize is that saying the words is almost the easy bit. It's saying the words whilst knowing that you have to run from this point to this point. Don't get blocked by that tree. Make sure you hit that light, drop the keys here. So it is very, very technical, and it takes a long time to do all those set pieces. And again, days like that, can be quite overwhelming. So I try to keep very contained, try to stay very physically contained because it takes a lot of brain power to put all those pieces together to make scenes like that work.
I can imagine just as a viewer, obviously with me being a journalist, I pick and pull, I'm studying television,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
studying
yeah,
you guys, I'm studying the storylines and so much more. So I like to hear more of, the behind the scenes when it
yeah.
comes to things like that
Yeah.
versus
No,
the
it's
one.
it's all really hard. It's not, it's really challenging, and it's something that people don't, there's, some ways when you watch things, there's this sense of like, oh, that must have been easy for her to just go running down that hill, fall, da 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 da. You know, it's like, yeah, but the car's got to be in the shot. If the car's not in the shot, we've got to go back. You know, especially with those big things, if it's not right and you have to go back to the beginning, then everybody has to get back to those first positions. So there's kind of it's quite a lot of quite a sort of pressurized situation for an actor when you've got to get all those things right.
And listen, I know our time is soon wrapping, but I want to quickly talk about filming on location because obviously this story is impeccably well written. We're talking about Apple TV. So, I mean, this is like perfection across the board, but does it as an actress, an actor, become not daunting, but like somewhat do you get restless when you're working on a project that you are pretty much stationary, scene
Mm.
wise, location wise, throughout the entire project?
No, I mean, look, there's obviously always points where you're sitting around in between takes while they're setting things up. That's the same on any set. Um, for me, again, on something like this, the environment and the surroundings are so important to the character's storyline. I found it really useful. You know, when you're feeling cold on days like that, that's great. That's how she feels. I don't have to pretend to feel cold, right? Feeling isolated, feeling lonely, feeling vulnerable, like to be in an environment like that. It's like walking onto a really good film set, right? You immediately are immersed in that world. So I don't get restless. You know, I always try and sort of use any of that type of energy for what I'm doing on camera, right? I think, you know, it's so easy to get exhausted doing night shoots, long hours. You know, I think the best thing you can do is sort of contain your energy and use the good stuff for when you're on screen. So yeah, I don't get restless. I mean, I'll find things to do if there's lots of waiting, but for me, that character in that environment, it really worked and it really it helped, if anything.
That's really good to know. Christine, listen, it was such a pleasure
You
meeting you,
too. Thank you so much for
speaking with
taking the time.
you.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much and congrats on everything.
Thank you so much. Take care. All the best. Bye.